If you were a praying mantis, it would be socially acceptable to devour your mate.
And if you're a honey badger, you have no regard for other animals. You don't care.
If you're a panda with twins, it's normal to abandon one to take care of the other.
But if humans do any of these things, we would call it wrong, unfair, or unjust.
Yeah, why is that? Why do humans care so much about justice?
Well, the Bible has a fascinating response to that question. On page 1, humans are set apart from all other creatures as the image of God.
Yeah, God's representatives who rule the world by his definition of good and evil.
And this identity, it's the bedrock of the Bible's view of justice. All humans are equal before God and have the right to be treated with dignity and fairness no matter who you are.
And that would be nice if we all did that. But we know how the world really works.
And the Bible addresses that too. It shows how we are constantly redefining good and evil to our own advantage at the expense of others.
Yeah, self-preservation. And the weaker someone is, the easier it is to take advantage of them.
And so in the biblical story, we see this happening on a personal level, but also in families, and then in communities, and in whole civilizations that create injustice, especially towards the vulnerable. But the story doesn't end there. Out of this whole mess, God chose a man named Abraham to start a new kind of family. Specifically, Abraham was to teach his family to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice.
Yeah, doing righteousness, that's a Bible word I don't really use, but what comes to mind is being a good person.
But what does that even mean, being good? The biblical Hebrew word for righteousness is tzedakah, and it's more specific. It's an ethical standard that refers to right relationships between people. It's about treating others as the image of God,
with the God-given dignity they deserve.
And this word justice, it's the Hebrew word mishpat. It can refer to retributive justice.
Like if I steal something, I pay the consequences.
Exactly. Yet most often in the Bible, mishpat refers to restorative justice. It means going a step further, actually seeking out vulnerable people who are being taken advantage of and helping them.
Yeah, some people call this charity.
But mishpat involves way more. It means taking steps to advocate for the vulnerable and changing social structures to prevent injustice.
So justice and righteousness are about a radical, selfless way of life.
Yeah, and you find this idea all over the Bible. Like here, in the book of Proverbs, what does it mean to bring about just righteousness?
Open your mouth for those who can't speak for themselves.
And what do these words mean for the prophets, like Jeremiah?
Rescue the disadvantaged, and don't tolerate oppression or violence against the immigrant, the orphan, and the widow.
And like here, look in the book of Psalms.
The Lord God upholds justice for the oppressed, gives food to the hungry, and sets the prisoner free. But he thwarts the way of the wicked. Whoa, he thwarts the wicked?
Yeah, in Hebrew, the word wicked is rasha. It means guilty or in the wrong. It refers to someone who mistreats another human, ignoring their dignity as an image of God.
So justice and righteousness is a big deal to God.
Yes, it's what Abraham's family, the Israelites, were to be all about. They ended up as immigrant slaves being oppressed unjustly in Egypt. And so God confronted Egypt's evil, declaring them to be rasha, guilty of injustice. And so he rescued Israel. But the tragic irony of the Old Testament story is that these redeemed people went on to commit the same acts of injustice against the vulnerable. And so God sent prophets who declared Israel guilty.
But they weren't the only ones. There's injustice everywhere.
Yeah, some people actively perpetrate injustice. Others receive benefits or privileges from unjust social structures they take for granted. And sadly, history has shown that when the oppressed gain power, they often become oppressors themselves.
So we all participate in injustice, actively or passively, even unintentionally. We're all the guilty ones.
And so this is the surprising message of the biblical story. God's response to humanity's legacy of injustice is to give us a gift, the life of Jesus. He did righteousness and justice, and yet he died on behalf of the guilty. But then God declared Jesus to be the righteous one when he rose from the dead. And so now Jesus offers his life to the guilty so that they too can be declared righteous before God, not because of anything they've done, but because of what Jesus did for them.
The earliest followers of Jesus experienced this righteousness from God, not just as a new status, but as a power that changed their lives and compelled them to act in surprising new ways.
Yeah, if God declared someone righteous when they didn't deserve it, the only reasonable response is to go and seek righteousness and justice for others.
This is a radical way of life, and it's not always convenient or easy. It's courageously making other people's problems my problems.
This is what Jesus meant by loving your neighbor as yourself. It's about a lifetime commitment fueled by the words of the ancient prophet Micah. God has told you, humans, what is good, and what the Lord requires of you is to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God.
Man, what a powerful and honestly convicting video. You know, so when I look at it, the part that sticks out to me is the idea that somehow I can be complicit in injustice and not even realize it. Like I don't know. Like I think about the clothes I wear, or the things I watch, or any number of things. I am complicit and I don't know it. Like, how can I start to examine that or process that even within my own life, within my own church or my city? I mean,
yeah, man, yes.
You just got to try.
That's a really important question. A lot of layers to it. I'm a Bible nerd, and so what I'm trying to do in this same season, asking the same questions, I'm trying to use the narratives of the Bible as like a set of glasses or lenses to help me think through a question like that. So here's one way you could work towards a set of glasses. On page 1 of Genesis, God installs a unified humanity, male and female, as God's image. And what is the image of God? Christians and Jews have debated that for a long time. But in the narrative, the fact that God appoints an image is given a very clear purpose. And so that they may rule. So God's the ultimate ruler, and the author of heaven and earth, but he appoints humans as representatives to rule on his behalf. And it's very clear, male and female, let them rule. So it's this very beautiful collective image of humanity as a unified family across their differences, in that case, male and female, let them rule. So what's interesting is as you go through the fall narrative, which in Genesis is not just the Garden of Eden story, it's what happens with Cain and Abel, and then Lamech, and then the violent warriors, and then with Babylon. It's all the fall narrative. And you just watch that unity and that co-rulership, that shared potential and responsibility. You just watch it fragment.
yeah, it's falling apart.
And so it happens when the husband and wife, their nakedness is now a vulnerability, so they hide their bodies from each other. And what God says is, now that you've chosen to redefine good and bad in your own eyes, a sad outcome of that is going to be, instead of shared rulership, it's now the distorted inverse, which is one ruling over the other, the male ruling over the female. And that is both true to the human experience, and it's on page 3, identified as a tragic distortion of. So there's an example of it when you have one part of the human family taking it upon itself to assume rulership over another, redefining good and bad by its own wisdom. That's given me a category for what it looks like, these uneven relationships. And the next narrative was 2 brothers, and Cain and Abel. So one has the favored goods from God, the other doesn't, and he's angry about that. So he takes it upon himself to extinguish the life of another. And then 7 generations on, it leads to a city with that guy's name on it, and you get Lamech, who's not the most famous character in the Bible, but man, he's the first real bad guy, other than that snake. And here's an image of violent, militant, masculine, I chopped this guy's head off for slapping me in public. That's my paraphrase of the song that he's saying. And he's proud, he's glorying in his violence. Wow. And he's the first person who takes more than one wife. So he's both he's now collecting women like property, which is, he's embodying that distorted male rule over female. And now it's communal violence that's all about the honor of one and the status of the one over the other. So these narratives are giving us really important tools to identify what it looks like when human relationships go wrong on an individual and a communal basis.
Yeah, it's spreading out.
And then it all leads to Babylon.
Right.
With the exaltation of one language and one city trying to ascend to the heights in the heavens, and to the place of, it's one culture assuming the place of the divine. And if you read on in the story of the Bible, Babylon becomes the archetypal oppressor alongside Egypt and so on. So what are these narratives trying to tell me? It's all of sad distortion of that shared, unified rule in Genesis 1. And so I think this narrative is equipping us with a set of glasses to look at my community and to say, where are there people groups, individuals, parts of my community where the way things are structured or organized, the way relationships work here, they are being left behind. They are not being given the opportunity to share in the image of God, ruling, contributing to our community by their full potential. And are things organized in such a way that some are benefiting, like Babylon, and exalted to a place of opportunity and rule, whereas others are not. And these concepts get co-opted by so many other narratives, but the Bible cares about this. What else are these stories about? And so how it relates to my complicity in it, I guess, is to say, where am I benefiting as an inhabitant of Lamech City? And maybe I'm not the victim of Lamech's violence. I might be in his extended family, right? Or it might be that, whatever, I'm a part of his tribe, and so it just so happens that my head's not probably ever going to get chopped off by a Lamech. But somebody else's is in my city. Should I care about that? Should I, is that a problem? Is that problem my problem? Just because, I happen to be on Lamech's side or think he is.
I'm on my brother's keeper, yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. That's exactly right. Do I have responsibility for the cry of the innocent blood that rises up to God? And in the biblical narrative, that image from page 1, the answer is, I think, very clear, and Jesus seems to take this very seriously. Yes, it is my responsibility as a human image of God, but then also as a follower of Jesus who is at least trying by God's grace to recover a more human way to be human. And those early narratives, for me, just have given a really kind of core set of images to both help see the way Babylon gets organized and the way Lamech City does what it does, but also to at least help me be self-critical. Because if I'm not threatened by Babylon or Lamech's violence, that doesn't mean that nobody else is. It just means that it hasn't been my life experience so far. And to listen to the stories of others and find out about people's experience. Man, for me personally, I grew up here in Portland, actually a few blocks from where we're filming. And one of the most important early experiences I had here in Portland was I went to a magnet high school because they had a special program I wanted to go to. And it was, at that part of Portland's history, it's changed now, but at that point, it was one of the historic majority African-American neighborhoods. And so I went to that high school, as a young white man, and I was a minority. And I had never had that experience in the part of Portland that I grew up in. And so I learned about a Portland that I never knew growing up as I made friends.
And it was right there.
It was 4 miles from my house. And as I made friends, I was like, oh, they're growing up in a different city. And the difference is the amount of melanin in our skin and our cultural backgrounds. And That really shaped me. And the cool factor of Portland, of what it's become, has always had this underbelly to me, because I know that it's not cool for everybody. For a lot of people, Portland is a very unhappy place to live because of the dynamics of how the city's organized itself over the years. And so those are the things that I think the biblical narrative is trying to help us learn how to see and care about and see as our responsibilities.